They say family is where you feel most at home. But what if one day, the place you've spent your whole life building no longer has room for you? What if the people you fed, cared for, and sacrificed everything for turned around and said, "You're just being dramatic"? This is not just a story of betrayal. It's a story of reclaiming voice, of burning wounds, and brighter beginnings. Her name is Amanda, 65 years old, 40 years a wife, 30 years a mother, 6 years a grandma. One day, her grandson called her bad grandma and threw hot chocolate on her chest. The rest of the family, they told her to calm down. But what no one knew was that Amanda had just won $10,000. And she wasn't about to let them spend another dime of it. It was a Saturday in late spring. The kind of day where sunlight danced on the kitchen floor and kids' laughter echoed down the hallway. Amanda stood by the stove, wiping sweat from her brow, while the birthday party roared on in the living room. She'd been up since 6. The oven was filled with chicken pot pie. The slow cooker hummed with beef and beans. Her famous vanilla pudding sat chilling in the fridge, Noah's favorite. She was tired, but she was used to being tired. What she wasn't used to was being invisible. From behind the kitchen door, she could hear them laughing. Her daughter Vivian, her husband Robert, her son-in-law Mark. Not once had someone asked if she needed help. But Amanda wasn't bitter. Not yet. She was holding on to a little secret. Tucked deep in her pocket was a scratch-off ticket worth $10,000. And for the first time in years, she had a plan. It started like every other family celebration Amanda had hosted for the past 40 years. At dawn, hair in a loose bun, apron already tied before the coffee even brewed. The kitchen lights flickered on while the rest of the house still slept. But that day wasn't just any day. It was her grandson Noah's 6th birthday. Balloons, dreamers, laughter echoing off the walls. A house full of family. And yet somehow Amanda felt completely alone. She stirred the stew, checked the pie, baked the vanilla pudding, Noah's favorite. Her daughter Vivian popped her head in, casually shouting, "Hey Mom, can you make your chicken pot pie too? And those beans? Oh, and the peach cobbler if there's time." Then disappeared back into the party like Amanda was the hired help. She didn't complain. Not out loud. Because that's what Amanda had always done. Kept the peace. And in families like hers, keeping the peace often meant keeping quiet. Out in the living room, laughter boomed. Plastic swords clashed. Wrapping paper flew. No one asked if Amanda needed help. No one even stepped into the kitchen unless they were looking for a clean fork. And maybe she could have ignored it all. She had many times before. But something about that day, the noise, the mess, the sheer invisibility of it all, started to settle in her bones like cold. She looked down at her hands, wrinkled, worn, red from chopping. Hands that had rocked babies, washed dishes, wiped away tears. And yet here they were, unseen behind a door no one bothered to open. There's a quiet kind of heartbreak that builds over years. Not in big explosions but in the small moments of being overlooked. The birthdays spent in the kitchen. The holidays spent behind the scenes. The silence when you walk into a room and no one even turns their head. Amanda had always believed that being needed was the same as being loved. But standing there, oven mitt in hand, she began to wonder if maybe she'd just been used. So many women, mothers, grandmothers, have told the same story. They throw the party, bake the cake, set the table and take the photo, but somehow never appear in it. Love doesn't mean service. And being a caregiver doesn't mean you stop deserving care in return. But Amanda hadn't given up hope just yet. Because that morning, before the chaos, before the noise, she'd picked up a scratch-off ticket at the corner store. Just a whim. Just a why not? And in a few short seconds, her life cracked open. Now she had something of her own. Secret. Spark. Sign. And she thought just maybe this birthday would finally be different. The scratch-off ticket had cost her $2. Amanda had picked it up on a whim that morning, right after buying vanilla extract and a birthday candle shaped like the number 6. It sat behind the cashier's counter under a small sign that read, "Feeling lucky?" She didn't feel lucky, not really. She just felt tired. But something made her reach into her purse and slide the crumpled bill across the counter. "Why not?" she murmured. "It's Noah's birthday. Maybe I'll get lucky too." She tucked it into her coat pocket and forgot about it, until the stew started to simmer and the pudding was cooling in the fridge. She leaned on the kitchen counter, peeled back the foil with the tip of a spoon, and squinted at the numbers. Then blinked, and blinked again. $10,000. Amanda checked the ticket 3 times, pulled up the lottery website just to be sure. It wasn't an error. It wasn't a prank. It was real. She clutched the ticket to her chest and for a second, just one, she felt light. Lighter than she had in years. This wasn't about the money. It was about possibility. For so long, every dollar she'd earned had gone to someone else. Groceries, school books, car repairs. Even the good things like birthday cakes and family dinners were never for her. But this was hers. Name. Her luck. Her win. She could finally take a day off. Buy herself a proper coat. Maybe even book a room by the lake for a weekend. Just to breathe. A woman named Joanne, 62, once shared in a Facebook group that she spent her entire adult life putting off joy. Then one day, she won a small local raffle. Just enough for a spa day. She went alone, got a facial, sat by the window and read a book cover to cover. She said it felt like therapy, like she was visiting herself for the first time in 40 years. Amanda's win wasn't just money. It was that same chance. To visit herself. To remember who she was before everyone else needed something from her. Sometimes, the biggest gifts don't change your world. They remind you that you still have one of your own. Amanda had planned to share the news at dinner. Not to brag, not to boast, just to give back. A gift for Noah. A little something for Vivian. Maybe something kind for Robert too. But before she could say a word, plastic cup flew through the air. And what happened next would burn more than just her skin. She was about to call them in for dinner. The dishes were done, 8 in total, each one stirred, seasoned and plated with quiet care. Amanda wiped her hands, straightened her apron, and rehearsed a smile in the reflection of the microwave door. This was her moment. Not to shine, she never asked for that. Just to share. Just to feel part of the table again. But before she could even step out of the kitchen, the door swung open. Noah stood there, his plastic sword now forgotten, his brow furrowed. "You didn't bring the cake," he snapped, arms folded. Amanda bent slightly, softening her voice. "Sweetheart, it's almost ready. Just another minute and—" "I don't want your food," he shouted. And in one angry swipe, he grabbed the nearest cup on the counter and flung it. Splash, gasp, crash. The cold, sticky soda soaked straight through her blouse, dripping down her chest. The cup shattered on the tile. She stumbled back, slamming into the cabinet. Her hands trembled from the shock. But no one came running. No one asked if she was okay. From the living room came Robert's voice. Calm, amused, indifferent. "Oh, come on, he's just a kid. Don't make a scene." And there it was again. Not the soda. Not the broken glass. The dismissal. As if her pain was optional. As if being hurt wasn't the problem. But reacting to it was. Real life parallel. A woman once shared in a grief support group that her grandson hit her with a toy during a tantrum. When she cried out, her daughter rolled her eyes and said, "Mom, you're being sensitive. He's 3. She said what hurt wasn't the bruise. It was the reminder that her feelings no longer counted. Amanda stood there, soaked and silent. The warmth she'd been carrying all day. From the soup pot, from the little win in her pocket, it drained from her like a leak in the soul. She realized in that moment, no one had her back. Not her husband. Not her daughter. Not even the little boy she'd rocked to sleep. What cut deepest wasn't the sting on her chest. It was the cold shoulders that followed. In families where keeping the peace means keep quiet, pain is never healed, it's just buried. Still, Amanda didn't cry. She wiped her shirt with a kitchen towel. took one steadying breath, and picked up the final serving dish. She would bring it to the table. She would smile. But when she stepped out of the kitchen, she saw a woman sitting in her seat. A woman from the past. And a smile that told Amanda she was already being replaced. She stepped out of the kitchen with the final dish in hand. Her smile was tired but brave, the kind a woman learns to wear after years of being overlooked. But then, she stopped cold. Sitting at the table, right beside her husband Robert, was a woman with manicured nails, a polished smile, and eyes that scanned the room like she'd been there 100 times. Her name was Diana Harper. Amanda hadn't seen her in decades. Not since high school, when Diana was the girl everyone adored, especially Robert. Back then, Amanda was the quiet one, the good girl, the reliable choice, while Robert had doodled Diana's name in the margins of his notebooks. Amanda had done his homework, typed his essays, packed his lunch for work after they married. And now there Diana sat, in Amanda's house, in Amanda's seat, with Amanda's grandson curled up next to her, calling her Grandma Diana. It's a strange kind of heartbreak, to be replaced while you're still in the room. Diana smiled up at her, soft and slow. "Hi, Charlotte," she said, like they were old friends sharing a cup of tea. Amanda opened her mouth to respond, but Robert cut in sharply. "What took you so long? People are starving." Then, turning to Diana with a warmth Amanda hadn't seen in years, he added, "Try this. She's not great at much, but I'll give her this. She can cook." Real-life parallel. There's a woman named Ellie, 64, who once wrote in a blog post, "I didn't realize I was being replaced until I saw someone else hanging our Christmas stockings." Her husband had invited a coworker to help with the decorations while Ellie was at her sister's. By the time she came home, the tree was done. So was her marriage. Amanda didn't respond. She sat quietly at the far end of the table, watching as her own family leaned toward a stranger like she'd always been there. She noticed Diana's hand brushing Noah's back, Vivian laughing louder than usual, Robert smiling. But it was Noah's voice that pierced the air next. "I don't want Grandma anymore. I want Grandma Diana. She's nicer." And just like that, Amanda's role was erased. Not with a fight, not with a goodbye, but with a child's sentence and a stranger's smile. Sometimes we don't get pushed out of our place. We just slowly stop being seen, until someone else walks in and takes it. Amanda sat still, hands folded, spine straight. But something inside her had shifted, quietly, permanently. Because sometimes all it takes is one sentence to change your life. And this time, it would be hers. The clatter of plates had just died down. Amanda sat at the far end of the table, her back aching, her shirt still damp from Noah's outburst. The stew had grown cold. So had the room, at least for her. Robert was laughing now. Laughing at something Diana had said about the good old days. His hand resting on her knee like it belonged there. Amanda looked at them, all of them. Vivian scrolling her phone mid-dinner. Mark sipping wine without once glancing her way. Noah in Diana's lap, beaming. And Robert, her husband of 40 years, offering ribs to another woman at the head of their table. She took a slow breath. And then, with the kind of calm that only comes after being invisible for far too long, she said softly, "Robert, I want a divorce." The words barely rose above the hum of the room, but they landed like thunder. The fork stopped moving. The laughter froze in mid-air. Robert scoffed first, then chuckled, as if she'd told a bad joke at the worst time. "Charlotte," he sneered, "you're 67. You think you're in your 20s again. You say stuff like that, and people will laugh." He didn't even look her in the eyes. Didn't ask why. Didn't ask if she was okay. Just leaned back, insulted. Because she'd dared to interrupt his performance. Amanda swallowed the sting in her throat. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just replied, "If none of you are ashamed, then why should I be?" Real-life parallel. In a podcast interview, a woman named Marlene, age 70, shared that she asked for a divorce after 45 years of marriage. Her husband laughed. Her kids told her to think it over. But the moment she filed the paperwork, she said, "It was like taking off a coat I didn't realize had been weighing me down for decades." Amanda's declaration wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't drama. It was clarity, boiled down into a single sentence. And like a match struck in the dark, it lit up everything around her. The double standards, the silence, the casual cruelty. Suddenly it was all too clear. This wasn't her home. It never really had been. Freedom doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes in the form of a whispered sentence. The kind you speak not to be heard, but to finally hear yourself. As Amanda stood to leave the table, her heart pounding not with fear, but with certainty, she thought for the first time in years, maybe I'll actually be okay. But just as her hand reached for the doorknob, she heard small, hurried footsteps behind her. And then came the burn that would change everything. Have you ever reached a moment in life where one sentence, just one, set you free? If Amanda's story has stirred something in you, we'd love to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell us. What part of her journey hit you the hardest? Was it the silence, the betrayal, or the quiet courage it takes to finally say, "I'm done"? Your voice matters here. Let's build a space where stories like Amanda's remind others they're not alone. The burn came suddenly, hot, sharp, and unexpected. Noah had been running toward her, a half-full mug of hot chocolate in his small hands. Amanda had barely turned around when his foot caught the corner of the rug. The mug tipped forward. And just like that, scalding liquid splashed across her chest. She gasped, the pain searing through layers of skin. Then lost her balance and fell hard near the front door. For a moment everything was still. No one rushed to help. No one screamed. Only Noah's voice broke the silence, high-pitched and crying. "Bad grandma, you don't love me anymore." Amanda didn't reply. She couldn't. Her chest was soaked, her shirt clinging to the raw skin beneath. The tile felt cold under her palms. And all she could think was, this wasn't an accident. Maybe not the spill, but the silence that followed it. Later that night, she sat quietly in a small hospital room. The walls were pale, the light soft, the nurse gentle. "You've got second-degree burns," the doctor said. "We'll need to clean and dress the area. You'll feel some stinging." Amanda nodded. She was used to stinging. But when the alcohol touched her skin, a sharp, biting sensation flared, and something else came with it. Something buried, grief, not just from the burn, but from decades of small, ignored injuries that no one ever treated. Not physical ones, but the kind that live behind polite smiles and unfinished sentences. She winced, then whispered, "No need to call anyone. I live alone." The nurse paused, glanced up, and said nothing. Just gently continued the work. And for the first time in what felt like years, Amanda exhaled. Not out of pain, but because she finally felt it. She was out of the house, out of the trap, out of the role she'd never truly chosen. Real life parallel. An older woman once wrote in a grief forum, "I didn't leave the marriage. I left the version of myself I didn't recognize anymore." She had been hospitalized after a fall. Her children didn't visit, but the nurse brought her tea and called her ma'am. She said, "That night, I realized I didn't want to go back to where I was just tolerated." Amanda sat still, wrapped in gauze and quiet. The machines beeped softly. The hallway lights flickered. And for once, the only thing anyone expected of her was to rest. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. And it was healing. Sometimes healing doesn't start with love. Starts with leaving. By morning, Amanda had booked a small room across town. Not forever, just for now. Place where no one called her selfish. A place where her name was the one on the keycard. She hadn't even changed the bandages yet. But already she was making plans. And this time, none of them involved asking for permission. Amanda hadn't even unpacked her bag when the notifications started rolling in. began with a photo. Diana, wearing Robert's old button-down shirt, smiling as she wiped the table in Amanda's kitchen. His caption read, "Some feelings never fade. After all these years, she's still the one." The image spread fast. Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. People called it a love story. High school sweethearts reunited. Love finds a way. She's 67 and glowing. But Amanda knew that glow had come at a cost. Worse, she'd been erased, reduced to a backstory, a bump in their fairy tale. And then came the worst part. Vivian, her own daughter, posted a clip. Noah sat in her lap, lips trembling on cue. "Grandma scared me," he sniffled. She yelled and threw plates. Vivian didn't correct him. She looked straight into the camera and said, "My mom's always had a strong personality. But that day she went too far." Amanda watched it all from her rental apartment's tiny couch. Her chest still bandaged. Her heart even more so. She didn't scream. She didn't lash out. She simply opened her phone, and for the first time in her life, hit record. In a quiet voice she said, "Hi, my name is Amanda. I'm Robert's ex-wife. And Noah is my grandson. Not everything you're seeing is the full story." She posted it. No music, no filter, no edits. At first it barely got any views. Until one stranger messaged her, "Ma'am, the truth deserves a title. Change the headline." So she did. She reposted the video with a new name. "Robert Collins, you're playing the hero. Maybe file the divorce first." And included a close-up photo of her medical report. The burn, a date, the truth. Within hours, the tide began to turn. Comments flooded in. "Wait, they're not even divorced yet. Why is no one talking about the burn report? She's speaking with receipts. I'm listening." People started remembering that grandma wasn't just a role you could assign to the most camera-friendly woman in the room. Real-life parallel. A woman named Sylvia, 68, once went viral for defending herself after her daughter painted her as toxic in a blog post. She calmly published her journals, old letters, even grocery receipts. Not to win a fight, but to prove she'd been there all along. Not perfect, but present. Amanda didn't want revenge. She wanted clarity. She wanted people to know that kindness doesn't always look like pearl earrings and soft voices. And pain doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes pain looks like holding your breath for 40 years. When they tell your story wrong, you don't have to shout. You just have to speak. And let the truth echo. The comments kept growing. The silence from Robert's side turned to panic. Vivian's sponsors dropped her. Diana went quiet. And Amanda, she finally felt something she hadn't felt in decades. But even more than that, she felt free enough to take her next step. And this time, it would be all hers. The day the divorce papers arrived, Amanda didn't cry. She didn't toast or shout or rip them in half. She just sat by the window in her tiny apartment, watching a bird land on the railing of her little balcony. She whispered to herself, "So this is what freedom sounds like. No shouting from upstairs. No barking orders from the living room. No passive-aggressive sighs over dinner. Just silence, gentle golden silence." And in that stillness, something inside her began to bloom. Not loudly, not all at once, but gently, like morning light spreading across a room that had been dark for too long. The next day, Amanda used part of her lottery winnings to buy something she never thought she'd own. Train ticket. Just one. To Portland. She sat by the window as the landscape flew by. Bridges, rivers, forests, towns she'd never stopped to notice before. She leaned her head against the glass and smiled. It wasn't about the destination. It was about the motion, the feeling of going somewhere on her own terms. She claimed her prize at the Oregon lottery office in a wool coat she'd bought for herself. The first item of clothing over $50 she'd ever owned that didn't come with someone else's judgment. When the interviewer asked what she'd do with the money, she didn't even hesitate. "I'm donating $100,000 to a women's shelter." There are too many women still stuck in kitchens, hoping for someone to say thank you. I want them to know they can leave, even with just their name and a bus pass. Real life parallel. There's a retired teacher in Arizona who went viral for buying an RV at 69 and spending a year traveling solo across the Southwest. When asked what made her finally go, she said, "I realized no one was going to write me back into the story unless I picked up the pen." Amanda started posting small updates online. A photo of her by the sea. A video of her learning to use the subway. A clip of her sipping coffee on a park bench, saying, "Today, I walked a mile without anyone asking me what's for dinner." People began to follow, not because she was flashy, but because she was real. A reminder that it's never too late to choose joy. When one door closes, it doesn't just shut behind you, it opens everything ahead of you, even if it creaks, even if it's scary. Amanda's story wasn't over, not even close. There was still a coat to buy, a hair appointment to schedule, a little gray cat to adopt, and a kitchen window waiting somewhere, with lavender blooming just outside. Because the journey wasn't about leaving them, it was about finally coming home to herself. Amanda never set out to become an icon. She didn't have a ring light. She didn't know how to edit a video. She barely knew how to hold her phone steady without her thumb covering the lens. But she had a voice. And now, she had the courage to use it. What started as a single clip, just her voice, a dim lamp, and a photo of her healing burn, soon became a wave. Her story resonated with women across the country. Widows, divorcees, grandmothers, even 20-somethings who saw their future selves in her quiet resilience. They called her brave. They called her real. But most importantly, they called her seen. She was invited on podcasts, asked to speak at community groups. One morning, she woke up to an email from a woman's magazine titled, "We want to hear from the grandma who walked out." Amanda chuckled. She never imagined that walking out of her old life would walk her right into the hearts of thousands. She replied simply, "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who finally said, enough." She started sharing photos from her travels. Her favorite hiking trail in Oregon. The lavender she planted on her balcony. A video of her sipping iced tea on the porch with her new rescue cat, Charlie, asleep beside her. And people followed. Not for the filters. Not for the fame. But for the feeling of freedom she carried in every word. Real life parallel. There's a woman named Linda, 72, who became a sensation on TikTok for filming honest monologues about widowhood, grief, and the art of beginning again. She once said, "I thought I was done being interesting. Turns out I was just done being quiet." Amanda felt the same. She began receiving messages. "I left my husband after watching your video. I booked my first solo trip. I'm scared but I'm going anyway. You're the grandma I wish I had." One message simply read, "Thank you for reminding me I'm allowed to exist." Sometimes the world won't see your value until you stop asking for their permission to shine. You don't need a rebrand. You just need to reclaim your voice, your space, your story. Amanda no longer checked Robert's updates. She no longer counted the days since she left. Instead, she counted blooming lavender pots, pages read before bed, and the soft sound of Charlie's purring as the sun warmed her new home. She'd been a wife, a mother, background character. But now she was the main story. And her final chapter was just beginning. Came on a Tuesday afternoon. The sky outside was soft with overcast clouds. And Amanda was standing barefoot in her kitchen, kneading dough for a peach tart she was baking for the neighbor's birthday. Charlie, her gray and white cat, was sprawled on the windowsill, sunbathing as if he owned the place. The phone buzzed. She glanced down. Robert. She hadn't seen his name light up her screen in months. She let it ring once. Then answered calmly. "Hi, Charlotte," he said, voice strangely casual, like he was calling to ask about the weather. "How've you been?" She smiled faintly. "Are you looking to film a sequel?" Silence. Then came the words she had known were coming. "I just thought maybe there's still a chance for us." Amanda didn't shout, didn't cry. She looked out at the lavender blooming just beyond the glass. Her hands dusted with flower, her breath steady. "Sorry," she said gently. "I'm in Alaska right now, watching the northern lights. Signal's not great. Gotta go." And she hung up. No anger, no drama, just peace. Real life parallel. A woman named Yvonne once shared that her ex-husband reached out 2 years after their divorce. Said he missed her. Said he didn't realize what he had. She told him, "I didn't leave so you'd notice. I left so I could finally stop needing you to." Amanda had spent 4 decades waiting for someone to see her. Now she'd spent 4 months finally seeing herself. She didn't need closure. She didn't need revenge. What she had now was choice. Choice over who entered her life, what she wore, where she slept, and most importantly, who she became. Sometimes the final act of freedom isn't walking out. It's not turning back. The greatest peace comes not from being chosen, but from choosing yourself and meaning it. Amanda no longer needed to explain why she left. The burn had healed. The story had been told. And now, her hands no longer chopped vegetables for people who wouldn't say thank you. They gardened. They baked. They held books. They wrote pages of her own making. And when she looked at herself in the mirror now, she didn't see a woman who'd been left behind. She saw a woman who'd finally arrived. Thank you for staying with Amanda's story all the way through. It wasn't just a story about a family dinner gone wrong. It was about finally choosing yourself, even after a lifetime of choosing everyone else first. The truth is, you're never too old to start again. You're never too far gone to come back to yourself. And sometimes, the greatest freedom comes when you finally stop asking for permission. Let us know in the comments. What did this story make you feel? Did it remind you of someone in your life? Or maybe even a part of yourself? If Amanda's voice gave you strength today, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that speak to the soul. Your support helps these voices reach someone who needs them. Until next time, take care, and never forget who you are.